Hey, I'm here with David Pepose, writer of Spencer and Locke, Going to the Chapel, and soon to be Spencer and Locke, the feature film. How-
Um, yeah, no, we're really excited about Spencer and Locke. We're working hard at on a fun multimedia adaptation of it. I will say, IMDb has it a little exaggerated. They have me listed as a writer because I wrote the comic.
yeah,
I'm not writing the scripts for anything. But we've been having some really cool conversations going on. COVID has kind of
yeah,
put a lot of stuff on pause right now, so
yeah,
we're sort of very much in a holding pattern, until things clear up here in Hollywood. But yeah, no, we're working with some really cool people, and fingers crossed. I mean, it's Hollywood; things change at the turn of a dime. But so far, so good. I'm really excited about it.
yeah. No, if I remember, I reviewed Spencer and Locke, and that was my first thought. I was like, I need a film or a Netflix season, something. But I,
Yeah,
I feel like the obvious question is, how have you been keeping sane during just being stuck at home
sure.
during COVID-19?
Um, well, I write full time. So I've been fortunate enough that my partner and I we both work from home before all this happened. Um, it sucks a little not to be able to go out.
Yeah,
Um, but weirdly enough, I think because the world itself has been on pause the last month plus, at least here in California. I've just been working. I've been working
uh,
a lot. I've been really fortunate that I haven't gotten any pencils down orders for any of the projects that I'm working on, and so I'm in various stages of I think 4 or 5 different projects right now,
uh,
and so it's actually been keeping me fairly busy.
yeah.
I wrapped I've wrapped I think 3 scripts so far since the stay-at-home order started. I'm almost done with a fourth. So, it's just trying to bank
Yeah.
stories, because I know once my biggest concern as a creator is, once Diamond reopens, I think we're all going to get whiplash at how much faster people are going to want things, and I don't think there's going to be any slowness as to the comics industry's recovery, and I think it's going to be very challenging to stay on
Yeah.
top of it once the floodgates open.
Well, yeah, and like kind of on that, a question I had, like typically when we go through something like this, you see
Sure.
like a new wave of creators, people you
Hmm.
wouldn't expect. Like right now, I know we did an interview with Kara Andrews, and he just talked about like new things he's trying as
Sure.
a creator. Have you found yourself like just being inspired by something like whatever's going on outside that you're like, you know what, this could be cool if I do it like this now, or this story came to me
Ye-
because of this.
there have been a couple instances of that. I'm working, or actually, I just turned in my story for a charity anthology that I
Okay.
think they'll hopefully be talking about relatively soon, and that certainly was kind of very therapeutic for me. It certainly felt like a little bit of a confessional because
Yeah.
when the world is suddenly halted and people are dying in droves, you can feel a little helpless as a comic book writer. I feel it's what are you doing
Yeah.
exactly, and it's very easy. I live on the internet. I'm a comic book writer, and since everybody's been stay at home, the general tenor of Facebook and Twitter has certainly gotten more shrill, and more anxious, and that takes a toll on me. It's easy for it to turn into noise,
Yeah.
and so I kind of took some of those feelings and I wrote about it. But I think, you know, I'm not looking to do like the next. I'm not looking to do a story, a comic series based on a pandemic or based on COVID, thing like that. I think, and part of it is thankfully, I personally have not been affected. My family's safe. We had one false alarm for one of my brothers, but thankfully he tested negative. Nice. But I do feel like that might be a little too soon, and I'm sure there's going to be some creator or some publisher who's going to try to do a pandemic story thinking that like they're going to be timely, and God bless them. I mean, if they can pull it off, great, but I'm not that guy. I think that would be the epitome of too soon. For me, I've been trying to use this crisis as a period of focus, and the comics industry in general, we're so fixated on week to week and month to month that we often lose sight of the long term. And I've been really fortunate that as a creator-owned indie guy, I don't have to think about that. I don't have to think about what's the month to month on my sales. I can take time in between books, and I can make sure that they feel kind of as timeless as possible, that I can sell them long haul. But this certainly has made me think even more long term of sort of what's my career plans here. I've certainly been thinking long and hard about my online presence. I'm working with a web designer to sort of build up a web store and to build up a personal author website. I think that's something that's been long overdue for me. And now when you can't go into a comic shop or you can't go to a convention, you have to start thinking about your newsletters, your social media, your digital outreach, thinking about digital audiences, things like Webtoons, Kickstarter, thinking about which publishers you're going to work with. I think seeing places like TKO and Scout, I think have been particularly effective in pivoting during this time, because they're saying, okay, we will mail books to you, and we will give 50% to the comic shop that you would have bought it from.
Oh, awesome.
Which is I think a wonderful way to build long-lasting relationships. I think the worst thing that any publisher or creative could do during this situation is act on impulse and to think short term. I maybe I'm talking a little out of school here. I think that has been some of the skepticism in my mind anyway about, say, DC's distribution changes, where they have certainly put in a lot of effort to help establish 2 new distributors, through comic companies, shops, but it's a lot of work for a month's worth of books. And is there going to be a lot of people buying, say, Daphne Byrne issue 4 when 80% of the comic shops are under stay-at-home orders? But I digress. I think so. This has really made me think a lot long term, and sort of, it's not just what's the next couple years of my career going to look like. What is this? What do I need to do? What infrastructure do I need to build for the next 10, for the next 20? And it's not something that's going to change overnight, which I think is really anxiety inducing for people. But that's not comics. Consistency is how you build a career in comics, and that's unfortunately a day-by-day and step-by-step process.
Yeah. No, like I've been noticing the change in the community, and it has gone. Comics has adapted in a way that some other fandoms, for some reason, just haven't. Like movies seem to have like hit a slog, and I'm like, sure, we have all the movies in the world, but the thing is, the comic book creators like you and all the rest are actually coming out here and like, hey guys, you're doing stuff like this more often. I haven't seen one, like, other than the Russo brothers, who did that random, like, cool, like, hey, here's secrets of Avengers Endgame.
Right.
I'm noticing comic book industry is coming together during this, whereas movie theaters and film companies are just at war with one another.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, how do you see, like, your community, like, around you? I know you said it was, like, social media sometimes can get a little rowdy.
Yeah.
But like, have you been seeing some of the supporters come in a little bit more now, and like how people are interacting with each other?
Sure. I mean, I think the industry, the thing I love about the industry is, we are trying to help. Uh, I've been invited to do charity anthologies. I was asked to participate for Creators for Comics, which was kind of a Twitter fundraiser, which just raised, I think they said it raised over $430,000 for to go towards comic shop relief.
That's awesome.
In fact, I just hopped off a call before we started talking. One of the things that I auctioned was a Zoom session or a Skype session to talk about how to pitch to publishers. And so, I was just talking with one of the auctioneers for that. So I think, it makes me feel a little better. I think I'm not alone in sort of feeling a little helpless and insignificant in the face of all this. And I think, creators, we know how to create, and we know how to, we I think instinctively know that a lot of things we do, sometimes they're loss leaders, sometimes the reward is not the paycheck. Sometimes it's just a greater good. I've been particularly really heartened by that. I mean, seeing, for example, Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld, who are making, tons of money for comic shops just by auctioning off sketches. They're making, 5 or 6 figures, for comic shop relief. So I think, it's rare for a situation to be described accurately as unprecedented, but this really is unprecedented. And I think for an industry that's so used to kind of lone wolfing it all the time, I mean, it's heartening to see that there are times we can come together, and then there are times when, every creator is sort of doing their own thing, but it's towards sort of a greater good. And I hope we can continue that collaborative spirit, post, when Diamond reopens. It's the fan in me. I'd love for Marvel and DC to step up, and if they did a crossover that would help comic shops, I'd be all for it. Both as a reader and a creator and a fan. But I think there's a lot of, I will say that this crisis, I think, has shown where some of the real industry leaders are. You see, Philip Sablik over at Boom. You see the Wassell brothers over at Vault. You see what the folks at TKO are doing. And Aftershock and Scout. For sure. I feel like Scout, more than just about anybody's kind of punched way outside their weight class to help out. And something that I was a little frustrated with, when everything was breaking with COVID, is you can't really get a consensus for the comics industry without Marvel and DC at the table. It's 75% of the direct market. And I have felt that Dan DiDio's departure from DC just before COVID struck was kind of the worst thing that could have happened to the industry, because he's so widely known as a leadership figure. And he, I think, would be very quick to speak to try to reassure people, and it, by extension, would push Marvel to do the same. And I think without him there as that sort of figurehead for the industry, I do feel like there was kind of a vital conversation with the industry leaders that wasn't being had. But I do think that the indie publishers, to their credit, really stepped up in a big way. And I think it's that kind of leadership that is going to speak volumes, for the direction of the comics industry in the years to come. Yeah.
I mean, during all this, like, on the brighter note, I saw some good news for like people like Boom Studios, who are like, you have deals with Netflix. And like you were saying, is like these, I don't want to say underdogs, but compared to Marvel and DC, everyone's just like, and like you were saying, they're stepping out and they're leading this way. And with like all the good news too, I feel like sometimes it gets, especially right now, it gets kind of swept to the side because so much is happening around the world. But I wanted to know, like, you've probably seen John Krasinski's Some Good News.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, like, what was some good news like you have been witnessing to? Like, yeah, we can talk about more about like some of the TKO and Scout and all them doing that, or if there was just something small that you saw and you were just like, you know what, that was awesome.
Yeah. Well, I think the publishers that have been telling their creators full steam ahead, I think that it speaks to they're banking on us. They're banking on us and our ideas. And I think the publishers that have recognized that, hey, like, creators need to pay rent too. And they need to eat, and they have families to provide for. Like I've said, I've been very fortunate that I'm working with publishers that have not told me pencils down. And seeing that, I think, has been helpful. It's been really encouraging to see there are creators who have been told pencils down, and then seeing them kind of get scooped up and say, all right, like, hey, while you're waiting, for your book, you want to work on something together. And people have been, I think, really excited for that. I think people, like, I just approached an artist actually last week that we're going to be working on something together. I think the fact that this feels like the kind of event that would be very easy for people to fold on themselves. And I haven't seen that. Sure, there's general anxiety, but is not, I think people, they want to create. That's how they express themselves, and that's how they kind of vent, and that's how they feel like themselves. I certainly feel that way. And I think that's been really encouraging, just to see that no matter what the rest of the world looks like, the comics industry is not going to take it lying down. We're not going to wind up on our backs over this. Like, we're going to, no matter what, whether we're kind of, whether it's through gallows humor or kind of whistling through the darkness, we're going to get back up. And I've always said that I think that's the barometer for success in comics. It's not talent, although talent's great to have, but it's your threshold for pain. It's your willingness to take rejection and failure and all sorts of obstacles that are thrown in your path, and to just say, I'm not going anywhere. That's what I've always said is I'm not going anywhere. It's going to take a lot more than a pandemic to get me to leave. And I feel like, seeing a lot of creators, even if they haven't said those exact words, you can see it through their actions. It's that even if there's no books coming out, comics are still being made, and they're still being celebrated, and there's still a community there amongst the creative side, and amongst the retailers, and amongst the press, and amongst the fans, and sort of all the intertwining thereof. That's really encouraging to me. It leads me to believe that no matter what the world throws at us, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah. And then, like you said, like, I know you're still working, you're still keeping busy.
Yeah.
But like the rest of us, have you found time to catch up on all those things that before this you were like, I just don't have time, and now you're like, I'm not going anywhere. I can take an episode or two.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly. I mean, I've already done a whole watch of Parks and Rec. I watched all of Devs the other week. Too Hot to Handle. But I will say, for me, it's helped me out a lot with just my creative output. I constantly live my life in guilt that I don't work fast enough. The thing is about being an indie writer in comics is you're the first link in the chain. Everything depends on you. And so, for example, I'm still working on Spencer and Locke Volume 3. And it is a very challenging, tough book to write. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's still not finished. And I live my life in constant guilt that it's not ready for George Santiago Jr. but there are other deadlines that I got to hit as well,
Yeah.
that actually have a set deadline. And so I will say this process, there's something weirdly calming about the rest of the world being on pause. And so there's not this sort of, it's not FOMO, but it's sort of the cousin of FOMO, fear of not doing work that you need to be doing. I don't know what the acronym is for that, but I'm sure there's a German word for it. But you know, with the rest of the noise of the world, you know, of all the chores and all the things you have to do, kind of suddenly subsiding. I feel like I've been working at the speed I've always wanted to work. So that I think is really, you know, I have a backlog of scripts that is longer than I care to admit, and it's growing all the time. But you know, for the first time, it's actually shrunk to a fairly manageable degree. So you know, I've got a little Google spreadsheet that's my planning doc, and I'm kind of like, all right, clicking a lot of X's there. This is good. This is the way my career probably should be going. So yeah, but you know, I've also found time. You know, I mean, I played through Final Fantasy VII Remake, loved it. Awesome game. Just it sticks the landing in an amazing way. You know, Super Mario Odyssey, great. So what if Super Mario had a mind controlling Captain America cap? That's basically, you know, yeah, you know, little things here and there, you know, and just trying to, you know, keep my mental health, you know, going as best I can given the circumstances, and knowing that when, you know, things seem depressing, you know, it's because the world's a little depressing right now, and just being a little kind and compassionate to yourself.
Yeah. Well, first of all, a suggestion for a kind show, Kippo on Netflix.
Okay.
It's by DreamWorks. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a 10-episode, just little show.
Right.
It's perfection.
Okay.
It's amazing. But I learned something about you. I did not know that you were a crime reporter before comics.
Yeah.
And when I learned that, and this was like way after I reviewed your book, my natural question was like is Spencer and Locke like almost inspired by some detectives you met while reporting crime?
Oh no, I wish. No, I worked. I was a reporter for the Berkshire Eagle in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. You know, for anybody who hasn't been to the Berkshires, it's the westernmost county in Massachusetts. Okay. Right, it's right along the New York state border. So you know, it's probably just as close to Albany as it is Boston. And you know, it was an interesting place to work. I started work there after college. I wrote for them for a few years, and I covered crime. I covered state politics, and it was a really interesting location. You know, it was a former GE factory town or county, I should say, and you know, GE had left about a decade prior, and the county had never really recovered economically. I actually moved there as the recession was kind of starting to really take its toll, so it was even more dire. But on the other hand, you know, people from Boston, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York State, you know, they all had vacation homes there because there was the ski resorts. It was sort of a very seasonal vacation town. So, you know, you go a couple of blocks and, you know, you've got these really nice ritzy homes, you know, vacation homes. And then you go a couple of blocks and, you know, it's a drug den. And, you know, they're in the same town. They're coexisting just a couple blocks apart. And so, you know, it was an interesting place to kind of cut my teeth. You know, there was a lot of gang crime. The Crips used to send, it was kind of like the finishing school for the Crips, you know, because it was sort of a smaller town. You know, the police wasn't as fierce as it would be in, say, Springfield or Albany, and so they would kind of send, you know, their people to kind of like cut their teeth, you know, make drug deals and the like. So, you know, there are a couple of, you know, I think my very first case that I covered, it was like a snitches get stitches case, and so somebody got like kind of stabbed, or not stabbed, slashed right across the cheekbone, just like, you know, middle of the night, they were just kind of standing, I think, waiting for a bus, and somebody just slashed them. You know, so it was you know, it was interesting. But yeah, I wouldn't say that Spencer and Locke per se were inspired by the police there, just because, you know, it was a very small town,
Yeah.
kind of police department, a lot of older, you know, people on the force. But you know, that honestly, my inspirations for Spencer and Locke, you know, I mean, there were a lot of artistic ones, of course. There was, you know, Christopher Nolan, his work on Memento in particular.
Yeah.
I always loved the idea of a detective with a disability who has to leverage that disability to work for him.
Yeah.
You know, that was sort of the real crux of the idea. You know, and you know, I studied psychology in college. You know, and so that was certainly inspiring for me in that regard. And yeah, and you know, just sort of this idea, you know, I mean, there's something a little romantic about that idea of sort of that sort of tortured hero, you know, tortured by his past. And but I think it's because there's something universal about that. I think we all have these kind of moments in our pasts that we don't like to think about, but kind of shape us. And we always kind of ask ourselves, like, are we going to be defined by this? Is there a way for us to get past this? And you know, some people do therapy, and other people write comic books about it. So you know, it's sort of it was a confluence of a lot of different things. But yeah, I will say that being a crime reporter and what was helpful is being able to write for speed. Not being afraid of a word count, being able to kind of make things a little more clipped. I feel like that certainly helped me figure out my structure for Spencer and Locke, and certainly helped with the editorial process. And certainly, honestly, I do my best work when there's a deadline. It's only when I don't have a deadline that I procrastinate. So you know, it was really helpful for me in saying, okay, we sold the book. I think it was Christmas of 2015. And we had to have it done by Halloween of 2016. And so I was like, all right, like this is what we got to do. Let's you know, let's get cracking. So I think I finished writing that book, sold it in Christmas, and I think I finished writing it MLK Day. And then it was the next 8 months of just production work for it.
Yeah, no, you mentioned studying psychology, and now looking back at the book, I see so many Jungian elements kind of baked into there.
Yeah.
And now, because I've been just deep in Jungian theory to a point where it's hard to go to sleep at night now. But
this is the wrong time for you to be getting into Jungian theory.
Oh, it's perfect. I'm rewatching Westworld too, so it's
that's
right
perfect.
in there,
Yeah.
right in there. But now though, I'm hoping in whatever comes of the Spencer and Locke film, we get a little David reporter who like just follows the story.
Yeah, right. Well, that'll probably be me if they don't let me on set. So, yeah, no, I am. Yeah, you know, it's yeah, it's one of those things. I'm very excited, very hopeful. You know, I think it's and I'm very excited to see where the comic series is going to go as well. Without spoiling too much, I mean, I think people know based on the teaser we sent out. You know, we're doing Garfield versus Peanuts for the 3rd volume. But that high concept really only scratches the surface. We're going to be. This is sort of our swan song. And that's part of the reason why it's taking so long to put together. Also because George and I have other deadlines, which we did not have for the first 2 volumes. But this is sort of designed to be our final statement on the series. It's not to say we might not do any more stories with the characters in the future, but I said to myself, at minimum, I want to do a trilogy.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be, you know, we're going to sort of lovingly reference and homage some of our favorite books. We're going to be looking at things like Dark Knight Returns, From Hell, Seven, Sleepers. It's going to be really. I'm really excited about it, and I think there's a lot of fun stuff that we can do. So we're taking our time to make sure that we stick the landing with it, because I want to make sure that every volume is even better than the one that came before it.
Yeah, and I think I've noticed that in your writing is it feels like a movie across the pages, like
Thank you.
every time. But then you said the Peanuts, and all I'm thinking is the psychiatrist for Locke is gonna be Peppermint Patty, and I just love that.
Yeah, well, we actually did have we had Lucy we actually had a little cameo of Lucy Van Pelt in volume 2. She was Locke's shrink at the beginning of volume 2. So it was a very kind of subtle wink and a nod, and who knows what'll happen for her in volume 3.
I'm
But
I'm ashamed of myself. I got the character's name wrong.
I
haven't read Peanuts in long time.
It's part of the reason why it's taking so long. Is I make it a point to reread every Calvin and Hobbes strip before I start a new arc, and but I also have to now read a bunch of Garfield and a bunch of Peanuts, and so trying to get all that, it's a lot to synthesize with other deadlines. So it's sort of, I'm chipping away at it slowly but surely, but I think it'll be worth it when it's all said and done.
Awesome. And thank you so much. Before I let you go, since you're such, I can tell, movie fan, what's a movie that you would suggest for people to watch that they might not even think twice about?
A movie that they should watch. You know what? I'm gonna say Atomic Blonde. Super fun movie. It's super stylized. I think that's really the reason I dig it. It was done by the director, I want to say, of the first John Wick movie. Yes. The lighting choices are amazing. Charlize Theron is really cool. It's kind of like this sort of 80s, early 90s neon drenched James Bond female-led movie that you never knew you needed. And so, that's just, I feel like, especially in comics, we're so used to things being so stylized because every artist and every colorist has their own way of doing things. And we don't necessarily get to experience that in the film sphere. And I think that's why I like Atomic Blonde so much, is I think it really does such interesting things with color and mood and lighting and camera perspective and setting, that it's almost sort of a sense of hyperrealism. You kind of transcend those physical limitations of what a camera can capture.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks, David, so much. Appreciate the time. Can't wait for all the stuff that you have coming out. But yeah, thanks.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks for having me.